Hey, it's Kevin again, my friend Mr. Robot, Season 2, Episode 9, in at 5.FVE. Sorry it took me so long to review this episode. I meant to review it on Thursday, I just was kind of tired, I didn't feel like reviewing it, but you guys don't care. Let's just get into this episode because I was definitely looking forward to it. Mainly because this was going to give us what we expected last episode to be. Now, I really did like last week's episode. I love last week's episode. I thought it was a great change of pace. I thought it showed that by getting rid of all the theatrics and taking rid of all the stuff that we're used to with this show, that it still is a great show on its own, and I was hoping that we get closure to that, as well as, seeing what happened with Elliots. And not only did this episode give me that, it gave me so much more than I expected. I mean, it threw a new twist in our faces, and there's more crazy stuff going on. We have 3 episodes left, and things are about to get insane, but let's just get in this episode, because I really did love the way the episode started off. I have to say that the way this episode started is what I was worried the show wasn't going to give us. I mean, there are so many times where I see a twist happen on a show and there's no talk. It just kind of happens, and they don't really talk about how it happened or the build-up of what happened there. And I was worried that Mr. Robot was going to do the same thing. Why? Because when we got to the twist, why is this? Because when we got to the twist, with Elliot in the jail cell, it just seemed like he was getting released. I didn't think like we were going to get any resolution. I was worried that the show was going to do that. But luckily it didn't at all, because we literally start right at the end of season 1. Remember when Elliot got that knock on the door and we all thought that it was his mother? Well, we then realized that it's actually this policeman who comes in and asks if he's Elliots and says he's under arrest for, and of course, we all were wondering 2 things. One, why is Elliot in jail, and how did he get in jail? We already know that, but then we realized what he is under arrest for. He's under arrest for unauthorized use of a computer that he was trespassing larceny. The other officers take everything away involving computers. Digital media tells them to check everywhere, and we find out that Flipper, his dog, was actually taken to animal control. So when he said to Ray that Flipper's gone, he didn't mean that Flipper died. He meant that Flipper is no longer in his care, which is interesting that we saw. And he's then searched and given thumbprints, and the officer asks him a few questions. Elliot says no to all of them, mainly because he's just trying to protect himself, and he doesn't want to reveal what's going on. And Elliot's lawyer says that he spoke with the prosecutor and says it can get the hacking charges reduced. However, theft charge is a bit more difficult. And I love the way they just took us through all this. It says the plaintiff was really upset about the stolen dog, but he thinks that they can negotiate, and tells him when the judge asks him for a plea, he is to simply say not guilty and, just say that he had nothing to do with it. And Elliot's then Skyping the judge in the police office. So we then see Elliot is Skyping the judge in the police office, which is really cool. I don't know if they actually do this, but either way, it was just kind of cool to see him not actually be in court, but Skyping. Although, we do know that Elliot only lets us see things the way he wants us to. So this could be another one of Elliot's lenses to make himself feel better. Maybe he really was in that courtroom, but to us, it looks like he was Skyping the judge. So I'm not going to say that he was or wasn't. I honestly don't know. But he admits that he is guilty, even though the judge said he's guilty. Elliot admits to being guilty for everything. The judge asked him if he realized what he's truly done, which is committing a felony. Elliot admits to everything. The judge asked him if he's aware of these allegations. He will be sent to jail. And Mr. Robot comes on the screen, asks him what the fuck he's doing. Elliot says he pleads guilty. Then the judge declares him guilty of all charges. Elliot's then sentenced to 18 months in jail, and boom, now we know how Elliot went to jail. And I love that. I love that very quickly they just showed us what happened, but there's still some questions we have unanswered, and I love that all those questions were answered, like I said, in these first 9 minutes, because he's then taken to jail, and we realize that Ray was actually the head warden, and he's that, which is interesting, and I like how Ray was appealing to Elliot, saying, let me try to get questions, and we can kind of see why Ray, how Ray could have gotten a hold of Elliot. Maybe he realized, what Elliot was in for, and he knew what Elliot did, and he tried to recruit Elliot for that reason, and obviously he was very shady, so he's then strip searched and then puts on his jumpsuit, and we then see how him and Leon truly met, who is surprised about how fast he was convinced, and tells him that he is convicted, and how he is the only guilty man in there, which is interesting that we saw. And I thought seeing Leon, it was really cool to see. Again, Joey Badass, I love seeing this character one more time, but I really thought it was cool just to see him, one last time, because it's probably going to be the last time we see him this season, I'm assuming at least. I mean, I thought we were going to see Ollie one last time, that didn't happen. I thought we were going to see Cisco, I don't think we were going to see Cisco again, and we've seen him pretty much the entire season, and Elliot says nothing. Leon tells him how to function in prison, shows him how the regimen is done, and I love how we realized that the regiment was not because Elliot made it, but it was basically because he had no choice. I mean, this is the way that they do things, and if you guys know from things like the night of, that there has to be a certain way you can live in prison. If you don't go by that specific schedule, then you're probably gonna end up in a very bad situation. So Elliot basically had to abide these rules and go by the schedule, which is why he told us that he was creating the regiment to basically get rid of Mr. Robot. So he talks about how they let them watch TV, which is filled with old 90s TV shows, which is how he got into Seinfeld, which I just thought that was a very interesting key detail. I thought it was actually really interesting to find out, and Leon tells him that he looks nervous, tells him to just be himself, and if they stick together, things will be fine. Elliot then sees a woman who they call Hot Carly, who is actually a transgender, and Leon tells him whatever he does to stay away from the white supremacists, which I think we can pretty much tell. Obviously, they were in prison too. Leon says he doesn't say much. Elliot says that he doesn't. Leon says that's cool with him. He's there to provide him with everything he may need: smoke pills, hard shit, porn, grandma porn, gay porn. He says he won't judge him, and will give him whatever he needs, and like we anticipated, Leon really was, kind of Elliot's guy. Now, was he actually part of the Dark Army? I don't think so. I don't think he was really part of the Dark Army. I think this is just something that Elliot showed us, so that way it would make sense in that narrative, but that's not actually what happened. I think Leon's just someone who was his trusted companion. He sticked by him through thick and thin, and in the end, I think probably got himself into solitary confinement. That's what I at least think happened to Leon. I think Leon probably went to solitary for what he did, because if you, commit a felony like that and you hurt someone, and you, stab someone like he did with the white supremacists, I'm pretty sure you're probably going to solitary, and I think that's probably what happened with Leon. So Elliot then asked him to give him a notebook, which we realize is how he started journaling, and Elliot's then led to a cell by the female warden that looked like his mom, and Elliot tells us that that's it, that's how it happened, and that's all we missed, and that's everything, and I like that very quickly we were caught up in those 9 minutes, because we had so many questions, and they were answered so quickly. I thought that was just so brilliantly done. The attention to detail there was so great, and that's something the show just does so well, is the way that it's able to answer things very quickly, and it always makes sense. There's nothing here that didn't make sense to me. It totally makes sense why Elliot, was arrested. And the other thing I really do like is that I was worried that we weren't going to see any resolution to that Lenny Krista plot, because it started in the season finale and it seemed like it just ended there. It didn't seem like it went anywhere, but we realize now that there is a consequence for that, and that it did end, and it ended with Lenny snitching on Elliot. He was the one that did this to him, and that's probably why Krista feels so guilty, and I think it's interesting that we saw that. And Elliot still, I don't think, knows that Krista was part of it, so I think that's interesting. And Elliot then is getting out of jail, and the officer asks him if he has everything he arrived with. He gives him the paper to discharge for, and the officer says he has the hack to thank for the letter. He's never received this many nonviolent defenders, and I like that he's not there for the hack. He's obviously there for Lenny's dog. But it makes us worry that maybe Elliot might go back to jail, because, of course, he is responsible for the hack. And he says that he's never received this many nonviolent defenders before. It's messing with the economy and prison, too. He tells him that they're squandered. He looks at his credit card, tells him it's worthless now. Elliot tells him to toss it, and Elliot tells us that this is his In It 5, or Return to Normal, which is why the episode's called In It 5. And is it possible to return after 90 days in a closed-up box? And Elliot says that In It 5 is supposed to bring color and sound, which that I thought was very interesting. If you remember, the montage at the end of Season 1 was the song Sound and Color by Avenged Sevenfold, I think their name is. I can't think. Alabama Shakes, that's their name. Alabama Shakes, they sing that song, and we know that that was the montage in Season 1, and I thought that in general was just very interesting that we saw that, but instead the world is gray and quiet, and that very much is true, because we see that things really are getting worse, and I think it's interesting to really see that here. So finally, Elliot gets to interact with other people this season, which is something we have been waiting for. And obviously, now that he's been in jail and he's out of jail, now he can interact with people. And we get a lot of interaction between him and Darlene, which I really did love. He goes to Darlene, who hugs him, talks to him about everything that's been going on, and I thought that was really great. So Angela goes to a closet, she finds this flash drive, and Darlene calls this company called Joseph Lerner and Cartland and pretends to be a junior executive there, says she has sensitive documents for Green regarding the front water case, and the woman says to send them over. Angela says that she's downstairs right now, tells her to bring them down right now. Monica says she'll be right down who is the, the person that's the receptionist, and which gives Angela the perfect opportunity to get into her office, onto the computer. She puts the flash drive in, looks at her watch, and again, Portia Doubleday just killed it here with the fear in her. But what I love about her in the scene is that she's not really feared. She's just worried that she's gonna get caught. She knows that Dom is hot on her trail. She knows that everyone's staring at her. She knows this isn't good, and we don't really know what she's trying to do here. But one of the workers comes in, assumes that she's Monica, and says to tell Green to give him a call after lunch. She agrees, goes back to what she's doing. The flash drive contains all of Green's personal information. This gets onto the computer, gets her to come across a folder about the Washington Township leak. She downloads the file, puts it onto the flash drive, and then she takes it out. So we don't really know what this is about or what she's doing, but obviously we know she has some sort of plan here, and I like that we're not quite sure what it is right now. So Darlene and Ellie then get onto the subway. She tells them that she hacked a contact and found an archive of screenshots and chats with them about something called Stage 2, and that is something to do with the femtocell, and she tried to tell Trenton and Mobley, but couldn't get in touch with either of them, and we still don't know what happened to Trenton and Mobley at the end of this episode, which is something I do like. I feel like it's going to be a question that's going to be very up in the air. We are going to get an answer to it, obviously, but we're just not getting an answer yet, and she says either of them she called, message, checked all the messages, both are AWOL'd, and Trenton's parents are wrecked. They filed a missing persons report. She's freaking out, and she thinks the Dark Army could actually be cleaning house, and that they might actually be going after people. And Elliot says that he thinks they're the ones behind his early release, and basically trying to tell her, look, they obviously had some good intention by releasing me, but in some ways they didn't, because now Elliot's now brought into this dark world. You know, that prison, the only good thing about it is that it was sheltering him from the reality. He wasn't seeing how bad everything was. He didn't realize the extent of what they did, and now that he does, I mean, while I think he thinks it's a good thing, I think by the end of this episode he kind of knows that it's not really, and she says that she should check with her contact, that being Cisco. Says they are not really on the best of terms as of right now, and I like that Cisco, we find out, isn't dead very quickly. We find out actually missed him when she hit him with the bat, which we'll get into, but basically, he says it doesn't matter, they can do this wasn't part of the deal. They go into an office, and she tells him to keep moving, says down to the basement, and she'll go to the side door, and they'll meet up at 7, and he says not yet, says he wants to go see her, and at this point, I was thinking Angela, because we know that those two were growing closer, but Darlene says that he thought this was to lose her tail, and asks if he's really gonna go see her. She says they seriously need to talk, shit has gone down the trail, and he says he needs to do this. And she agrees, tells him to be quick. She'll wait in the stairwell. He goes to see, we actually find out, their mom, who I'm assuming is dying. I don't think she's going to live for that much longer. And obviously, this is something that he needs to do, because his mom, technically, in his mind, has been with him this entire time. And she's in the retirement home in a very catatonic state, and he asks if they're taking care of her, and he says that they should fix the clock because it's probably broken. He asks how she is. He tells her a lot's happened since he last saw her. He had a really hard time, and says he just wanted to say thank you because she helped him survive these last couple months. And he doesn't think he could have done it without her, and he tells her to take care of herself, heads out. Kind of felt a bit season series finale-ish, and I thought that was a very well done scene. Really did love the way that was done. And I think it's really Ellie just saying, you know, thank you. Obviously, I knew it wasn't real, but you were with me the whole time, and couldn't have done without you. And I am hoping that his mom does survive, so we get more with that, but I don't really know what's going to happen there. I think that's definitely going to be very interesting. But I really did love that scene. Again, Rami Malek just shines in scenes like that, and I think he really was fantastic there. So White Rose and Shun, we find out is his name. I didn't pronounce it right. It's not Zun, it's Shun. They're at someone named Lester's gravestone, and White Rose tells Shun that Elliot has been released, tells him it's not time yet. Shun says they'll be late if they don't go now. White Rose asks if he knows who this is. She says the previous CEO of Evil Corp, who served from 1986 until his death in 1995, and asks if he knows how it came to be that he lies 2 years before them, and Shun says it must have been a plane accident, and White Rose says not not to use the word accident, which that's interesting. Why doesn't White Rose like that word? We don't really know, but obviously there's a reason why, and we know that obviously she's pretending to be Master Sang. We know that that's not really who she is, but she actually is White Rose. But obviously there's a reason she doesn't like that word accident, and we don't really know why. So Shun says a plane crash, but doesn't understand the significance of it all, and White Rose says that in the wake of a scandal, he was going to shut down her project, and instead, he's where he should be, and if her project remains intact, she then urinates on the gravestone and says she's feeling inclined to take the same action now that she did then, and basically just to rue his memory and say that, you know, she wants them to do with him and that she's going to be better than him. And I thought that was a very interesting scene. Really did like the way it was done. A lot of White Rose and Shun in this episode, and I think all their scenes were really great here. We'll remind how great of an actor BD1 is. He's killing every scene he's in. Whether he's White Rose or whether he's Master Sang, he just absolutely kills it. And that scene is definitely a reminder of how good he really is. So, Elliot then tells us that Init 5 is supposed to be the fresh start of real connections, and this might be his only moment of real normacy, which is taking a piss in private. But then the second he says that, he hears Cisco yelling at Darlene for hitting him with a baseball bat, and he washed his hands, and he's doing whatever he can to just block it out, because he wants to return to normalcy, he doesn't want to be involved, and he kind of just wants to start over, and he feels this is the point to do that, and he doesn't really want to deal with what's going on. And let me just say, Carly Chaikin and the dude that played Cisco, so funny in this scene, honestly, so funny. I love Cisco yelling at Darlene for hitting him with a baseball bat, and her realizing that even though she's so strong, she still can't, for the life of her, hit someone with a baseball bat properly. I mean, it does show that these characters are flawed. They're not perfect. They're not always going to get everything done as they wanted to. And I like that it's just Darlene hit him in, you know, a hint of rage, and she didn't actually hit him. I thought that was funny. And he tries to block it out, but then something weird is going on. He hears Mr. Robot telling them to calm down, and what I mean by that is that he's not there. Like, Mr. Robot's in the other room. And to settle down, relax, realize what he's really doing, which is yelling at them. And at this point, I'm freaking out. I'm like, holy shit, what's going on here? Like, I honestly thought that Mr. Robot and Elliot were actually two different people. I mean, this show has just mind-fucked us so many times that I really thought they were going to do that. But then we realize that Elliot's actually blacking out, and he's having an out-of-body experience. And Darlene says to come back to Earth, and the best way I think we can sum this up is that Mr. Robot and Elliot are definitely starting to become two separate people. This is no longer a split personality. This is two people in one body, and I think we definitely are seeing that with Elliot and Mr. Robot. Mr. Robot, we know, is there to help Elliot. We've already established this, but I do think that Mr. Robot is starting to go rogue, and there are things that he's going to say that Elliot's not remembering, such as, you know, it explains the ending for this episode, which we'll get into, but she says she thought that he wanted to find Mobley and Trenton, and he says he doesn't need to know what happened to them, and just that whole scene, we don't really know what he was doing, if he was talking to them. I mean, just a really interesting scene. Cisco says he can't keep up with them, he's not risking their life with this, and Elliot asks if he has a Dark Army contact like them, and Cisco says that if they find out he was involved, it'll be his ass on the line, and he'll be the next one gone missing. Only there won't be any questions about where he went because they'll know what happened to him. And he gives Elliot this paper, says he better be more reliable than his sister. He looks at the paper and Mr. Robot asks what just happened because he doesn't know either. And I love that this isn't Mr. Robot trying to take control. He doesn't know what's going on either. And Elliot says that he was going to ask him the same and ask why he was talking with them. Mr. Robot says that 1 second everything was normal and the next second he stopped responding, like he shut down. He had to say something and he doesn't really know what's going on or why this happened, and I thought that was very interesting. Then we get the scene between White Rose and Price, the only scene with Price in the episode, but it's enough because it's about 4 minutes long, and I think it definitely shows something about Price that we haven't seen. Now, I think I called Price 2 episodes ago just a guy that wanted a friend. I don't know what the hell I was talking about. I really didn't. I think Michael Christopher just has done such a great job with his sympathizing Price that I was kind of trying to make it seem like he was somewhat of a good guy. This episode confirms that he definitely has very evil intentions, and he's not necessarily a bad guy, but clearly he is money-oriented, and that's really the only thing that matters to him. And he's with Price, and says it's been so unfortunate what Evil Corp has been through in the past several weeks, and Price says that it's timing that seems almost intentional, and White Rose, of course, pretending to be Master Sane, says that their pet project came out even better than he thought and says that she surprised him. It's a good feeling. And Price says that it's too bad for all she's done. It won't matter. The failure of a bailout is worth a rather obsequious position, and they failed the potential stress test, so he won't be able to keep up all of their facilities. And says as of noon this Friday, the Washington Township plan will be taken over by the federal government, and they're not going to be able to study it anymore. And we realize that that's what they've been working on. Obviously, this is something that Angela has come across. It's probably something she's in her new line of work, and now she is getting involved with it. So White Rose says that he thought that they were taking a step forward, but here they stand 2 steps back, and says his actions remind him of the previous CEO. And Price says if he wants to take a shot at him, be his guest. The appointment of a new CEO isn't going to stop the government from taking over the plant. And White Rose says that he's waited 13 hours and 35 minutes, and if he has a point, it's time. Price says he needs that bailout money, and he no longer has it, and he now needs cash, loss of it, and he can see a scenario where and basically he tells him the scenario, but he really wants it done. He says the Chinese government is in a bid to establish itself as the new global leader of the 21st century. They're going to loan Evil Corp the money it needs at a low interest rates, maybe even zero. Like, he's literally willing to go at zero for an interest rate, so they don't have to pay at all, as a gesture of goodwill towards the American people. And he says with said cash, he can save his plants and the federal government, and finally the peaceful China appears benevolent, and that's what he'd like to see happen. Now, White Rose obviously is not willing to comply. He says he will be happy to go back and talk to China's government, and they should agree, but the next time he threatens his plants, and Price says the only move left in that scenario is a third world war. Honestly, I could see the show going that route. Honestly, the way that things have been going this season, I would be surprised if we end up in a third world war. And he tells me he's a mercenary, he doesn't play fair, which is something that I haven't really picked up upon. The fact that Price is a mercenary. If you don't know what that means, it means they're only concerned with money. That's all it is. They don't really care about the person, they care more about the money. And that's exactly what Price cares about. He wants money, he wants to do whatever he can to get it, and it makes sense, because especially the way the world is in this show, you know, it's very hard to get money now. We know that eCoin right now is the only way to gain money, and obviously Price needs a lot more money than that. And I think Price is someone where if he doesn't have enough money, it makes him go insane, because he's very money oriented. That's his only goal. His goal is to have money, and if he doesn't have money, then he's just doesn't feel like he's himself. He feels like there's a part of him that's empty, and I think we definitely do see that here, and I thought that was very interesting. But he basically tells him he doesn't play fair, he gets what he wants, and when he deals with the mercenary, all the court gets tossed out the window, so go ahead, tell him Order will not protect him anymore. He will reign chaos even if it hurts him, as he would rather see him lose than win himself. And he tells him that's all the time he has, and basically he goes out. So definitely there's going to be sort of like this conflict between White Rose and Price. Obviously, White Rose is someone who I think is willing to listen to Price, but if they can't make it happen, they can't make it happen. Obviously, Price is the one that is making things difficult. He's someone, like I said, that's money-oriented. He's someone that's going to go crazy without it, and I don't really know who really is going to win here. But that's something I'm definitely looking forward to, is this battle between them. I'd rather see them battling than working on each other's side. I think it's more interesting, honestly, to see that, especially with us seeing Price desperate for money. I think that's the point where we're supposed to sympathize with him, because we understand that he does need money. He'll do whatever he can to get it, and I think it's definitely interesting that we saw that. So I really did love that scene. Michael Christopher just continues to impress me, and he really is doing an incredible job. So Elliot says on May 9th, they took the world's biggest conglomerate, they had all the same intention to change the world, but there was one other player, and that was the Dark Army, and they never did find out really what their intentions were. And I think that's something that we've been trying to figure out all season. We've known the Dark Army's been there, but there have been so many questionable actions. You know, them releasing Elliots is a good thing and a bad thing. It's like I said, it's a good thing in the sense that they're getting Elliot out of jail. It's a bad thing because he's being exposed to the new world. Them murdering Romero, for example. We don't really know what happened to him. We don't know who murdered him or what the reason was, but basically, Elliot says that his name is Shun, and he says his boss is White Rose, who helped them bring down Evil Corp, and Shun is people wanting the Femme to sell. He's unsure of why, but soon he will know everything because they are hacking Shun. And Mr. Robot says that something's not right, he feels off, and it's like they're overheating, and Elliot tells him that they'll be fine. He says they're up, and he has a connection, and Darlene and Cisco then get up, they go to the laptop. Elliot says it's time to set up the meeting with Shun, and Cisco says that he thought they were operating from there. And Elliot says that this only gets his phone mic up live, and he's going to ask them about Stage 2. That's the main reason why they're going. They need to know about Stage 2, what it actually is, and even if they don't tell them anything, at least it'll get them talking about it, and that's all they really need right now. And Cisco says he's just like Darlene. He doesn't stop, and he's not doing it because they won't think twice about killing him on the spot. And Elliot says to just trust him. He has a way to get him talking, and Darlene says she'd love to meet him. And Elliot says he's not meeting her, he's meeting Mr. Robot. And obviously, they look at him very weird. They don't know what he's talking about, and Elliot says nothing, he meant him. So again, I think it's really showing that these two personalities are now becoming two individual people, and Ellie doesn't see it as himself anymore. He doesn't see Mr. Robot as the more negative or someone that's trying to help more like his conscience. He now sees it as a legit person, and I think it's very interesting that we're seeing that now, and I think it's definitely interesting that now Elliott's being exposed to the world. He's starting to become more like Mr. Robot, and Mr. Robot says that something's happening with them. They can't do this, and Elliot says he's got it, and I think it was a very interesting scene. Darlene, I believe, knows about Mr. Robot, but obviously Cisco doesn't, so I thought that was a very interesting scene. But like I said, I think the more this goes on, the more Fight Club-esque it's going to get. The two are going to become, you know, the split personality is going to become two separate people, and I think we're definitely going to see that. So Angela's with this police officer and talks to him about what she's found, asks what the next course of action should be. The man says it falls under what they call substantial and specific danger to public health and safety. He says they're bound by law to protect her anonymity, and that there could be money for a whistleblower in a situation like this, which a whistleblower, of course, is like a rape victim, and they might not be able to get her a lawyer. She says she's not doing this for the money, she just wants it to happen as fast as possible, and he says he'll take it to the deputy director. He asks if she minds sticking around for a while. She says she doesn't. Now, I am 100% convinced that this is not something that Price told her to do. Again, we've known that Angela's been going rogue a lot this season. We know, obviously, that Price is not at all happy that she's doing things that he's not telling her to do, and I feel like this is a perfect example of that. I don't think was told to do this. I think Price, you know, this is just something that she wants to do, and we don't really know what's going to happen there. So Elliot's on the subway, sees a man playing a computer game. He goes to the man, he sees Cisco's talking to Mr. Robot in the other door, which is locked, and Elliot begs for someone to open it. He keeps banging on it, and he then realizes where he really is, that he actually is talking to Cisco, and that it's not Mr. Robot, he's the one talking to him, which that was very interesting that we saw, and Elliot begs, and basically Cisco says the next stop, asks if he's nervous. Elliot says he's good. They head out to meet with the Dark Army. Darlene, meanwhile, is listening into conversations, and she's watching Nancy Grace talking about F Society and sees their messages is playing, and she goes through tapes to find the right one, realizing that they're being exposed, that the tape that they had, obviously someone leaked it out, and we don't really know what's going on there. But Shun then goes to Elliot, asks what the fuck is going on. Cisco says he wants to see him. Shun and his men are about to leave, and Elliot asks why, and Cisco says because they weren't expecting him. Elliot shouts to look at him, says to tell White Rose he wants to know what Stage 2 is, and I thought that was a very interesting scene. Obviously wants to know what's going on there. The deputy director, Phelps, then goes to Angela and says this is the second brownout tonight. They've been preparing for it since Comet Electric went on strike. She tells her what Jeff told her, asks her to come with her. She says her colleagues and her wanted to ask her a few questions and says they're so indebted to people like her. She never ceases to be astonished by the heroics of everyday people. And she asks if she came all the way down from New York just for this, or is she from New Jersey? And she says that she needs some contact information. She says that Jeff promised anonymity, which is a nice idea to be sure, which I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing that word right. I don't know how you pronounce that, but Angela asks if he's going to be in the meeting. Phelps says that's complicated, but someone will meet with her to discuss this with her after they review, and she asks if she works at Evil Corp and asks what her position is there, and Angela asks to get her files in the drive back, and Phelps says she made it all the way down there and they can't stop now, and Angela says it's taking a lot longer than she thought and she can't miss the next train back, and Phelps says that they're all waiting to talk to her. So Angela says no, she leaves, and she obviously knows that they're coming after her. She knows that this won't end well for her, and obviously they're trying to, she feels, expose her cover, and I'm pretty sure that is what they were doing. I mean, we know that Dom, obviously, she told them to do something about her, and she's not going to do it, and I think it was definitely interesting we saw that, and I really did love the way that that went. So Ellie and Cisco then go back to Darlene, who asks how it went. Ellie says that everything's on track. She says the lights have been flickering, and Cisco says the brownouts have started. She says she's got to talk to him for a minute. She says she left the busted VHS tape at the Smart House, and he asks what tape, and she says that it's the F Society video, and he says that they must have got it, considering how good they cleaned house. She says it's not there. They have to go back. He says they can't. It was a month ago, and the cops could have been there already, and she says it doesn't matter. They have to go back, and she says her face is on it, and he asks where it is. She says she thinks she left it on a lamp in the living room. Maybe it fell behind, but he agrees to retrieve it, and she thanks him, and I thought that was a very good scene. She then goes to Elliot, tells him that he looked burnt. He says that he's getting tired. She says that he can stay there and crash on the couch, and once again, we then see that it's Mr. Robot that she's talking to, and says home would be better. She says they're going to be watching. He says it's all the more reason they need to see him living a normal life, and just the flickering of it being Mr. Robot Elliot, Mr. Robot Elliot, it really does show that he's no longer in control of this. Neither is Mr. Robot, and I think it's very interesting the way we're seeing that. So she agrees, but assumes the worst, says his place is probably bug. He needs to be careful going back there. She says she'll stay there and keep listening, and he leaves. Angela's in at her apartment and hears her doorbell ring. She goes to the door, and it's none other than Dom who's at her door. He says that one of her fellow tenants let her in the building, asked her to come in. Angela says she's busy, but Dom left herself in anyway. And at this point, I'm like, oh shit. She's there, obviously, to investigate her. She's there to get questions out of her. She's there to basically get her on tape saying that she's guilty for everything she's doing. But we realize in this episode that it might not actually be what Dom is there for, which is interesting. And she comments her place, says they must take good care of her there. She asks if it's Evil Corp housing, and Angela asks if she's working for them. She asks what she means. Angela says she needs her to leave. Dom says that she had this dream, which if she knows her, it's pretty weird. It was weird at first, then exciting. There was this beautiful woman who was very sexy, who, by the way, we find out that Dom is actually, I think, lesbian in this episode, which is interesting. I don't think that's something that we knew, but just something interesting to her character. I like that we saw that. I don't really think we've had a lesbian character on the show before, and I like that we saw that here. Obviously, we had Gideon, but now we have Dom, and I think it's interesting the way that was done, but it went very downhill fast, ended with her drowning, and she says Ollie told her about the CD at Allsafe. It was the first thing out of his mouth when they interviewed him 2 months ago, and they've been tracking her ever since, including what she just did, and it's clear she's freaking about something. She doesn't know how it all ties together, but eventually someone will connect the dots and it will catch up to her. And she says she's being real with her right now. The next person isn't going to order her food. They're going to take her to jail. And that's just how it's going to go. You know, the next person who comes to her, they're not there to grab a bite to eat. They're question her. They're there to take her to jail. And basically, she says she still has one hand to play, and that's her. She gets up, says in that dream she had when she was being drowned, it was when she stopped fighting it, and when she finally let go and stopped fighting, so much that when she survived, and that's when she survived. So she then placed her car on the table, walks out, and it seems like she actually wants to help her, which is interesting, and I didn't really think that that's what she wanted to do, but it clearly seems like that's what Dom really wants to do. The question is Angela really ready to accept her help? Obviously, Dom wants to give it to her, but we'll have to see what Angela decides to do in the next episode. So Cisco goes back to the Smart House, searches for the tape, but he finds it, but then sees someone else. And we don't know what he sees, but obviously he's freaking out. Darlene's then listening to conversations from the Dark Army, and Shun is talking to his guests about what Elliot said, and White Rose says it doesn't make sense that Elliot doesn't remember it since Stage 2 was his plan. So again, you can clearly tell that this has been happening to Elliot for a while. Him, Mr. Robot, obviously. Elliot most likely came to him about this. We'll talk about this in a second, but basically we realize that Stage 2 was actually Elliot's plan, that he clearly forgets it, and Elliot says that it began as a failure. Everything, his existence, he should recognize that and accept it. He says for him, there's no such thing as normalcy, and I think that honestly is, kind of a quote for the show. There's no such thing as normal for the show. The show there is no status quo in Mr. Robot. There is no regular, type of episode of Mr. Robot. Every episode is different, and that's something I've always really loved about the show. So his dead father appears, he talks to us, an invisible friend, and he asks us if we're normal, but we never talk back. Darlene continues to listen in. White Rose asks if Elliot ever asked about the others, his friends, the man and the girl, of course being Trenton and Mobley, and Shun says he didn't. White Rose says to him, the phone, he followed protocol, and he is a master, and he needs to be extremely careful. Then it cuts out. The power goes in and out. She then hears a knocking at the door, goes to answer it, not knowing who it is, and I'm thinking that it actually might be Tyrell. I'm thinking that we're going to find out what happened, especially when we get to the end of the episode where Elliot walks down the street, asks how he can return to normal. When the SUV belonging to the man he murdered is parked outside his apartment, he says he has no normal, which again, I think sums up the show. He walks to the van, the driver rolls down the window. It's revealed to be Joanna, who greets him, calls him Ollie, and that is the way the episode ends. Crazy stuff overall, and let's get into this episode and my predictions for, of course, next week. So once again, I mean, another really insane episode. There's a lot of stuff to talk about here. Let's talk about this twist, though, because I don't really feel that it's that surprising. I think it kind of makes sense that Ellie was the one behind Stage 2, because of the fact that we know throughout the episode, him and Mr. Robot obviously are starting to short out. One of them is forgetting what happened to the other, and we don't know which one was which, you know, if it's Elliots that's shorting out and Mr. Robot's becoming him, or if Elliots just blacking out a lot more. I think it's definitely something of the two. Something is definitely happening there. We don't really know what it is, but I think Elliot obviously did go to White Rose. He told him about Stage 2, and we don't know what Stage 2 is, and I'm looking forward to seeing what Stage 2 really is going to be. Maybe when Elliot went to White Rose in episode 8, maybe he said more to him, but I think it's going to be interesting when we saw that, and we'll have to see what happens with that. As far as Darlene, I think it's Tyrell at the door. I really do. I think we're finally going to find out in next week's episode what happened to Tyrell. It's been the big question. I don't think he's dead. I really don't think that Tyrell's actually dead. Again, I think Mr. Robot's just saying that. I think that Tyrell's actually alive, because Joanna's there. Some reason Joanna's gone to him. We don't really know why she's gone to him or what she wants with him, but I think she knows something, and I think she's going to confess or admit what happened to Tyrell to him in the next episode. I'm pretty sure we're going to find out in the next episode. We'll have to see. As far as Angela, Dom now wants to help her, we realize. So is Angela really ready to take this help? What's going to happen with that? That's going to be very interesting. And then as far, I think that's going to be interesting what happened with that. What did Cisco see? We obviously know that there was something he saw. We don't know what it is. But Angela, like I said, she really needs to be careful, because if she doesn't agree to Dom, she could go to jail. And I honestly could see Angela going to jail. I've heard a lot of people say that the season might end with everyone else going to jail, and I could really possibly see that happening. I think it'd be a very dark direction, but the season's already so dark that I really don't think, at this point, anything is possible. I mean, Mr. Robot's just one of those shows where there is no status quo, and anything is possible. I think, honestly, that is a possibility. That could happen, and definitely I could see a scenario where that ends up happening, but we'll have to see what happens with that. As far as Price, is Price going to get what he wants from White Rose? We'll have to see what happens with that. I think that's going to be interesting. And what is the Dark Army's actual plan? Why did they release Elliot? Why did they kill Romero? These are things I think we're going to find out very soon. Guys, we have 3 episodes left, and I can't believe it. This season has flown by for me. You guys know how much I love this season, but I can't wait for these last 3 episodes. I think they're going to be incredible. Technically 2 episodes if you count the finale as 1 episode. I'm saying 3 episodes because we have next week's and then we have a 2-hour finale, but we'll have to see what happens with that. Overall, guys, let me know what you guys thought of this episode. Absolutely loved it overall, as usual. Another amazing episode. But that's my review. Hope you guys enjoyed it. We'll see you guys in my next video, which will be for, I think, a movie review. Yeah, it will be for a movie review, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.